would be episode 11 in section 2.
There
Oh,
we go.
I can't get the words. Well, doesn't recognize. Anyway,
Okay.
Deshil is the opening word.
wait a minute.
It's right after Gertie McDowell exits the stage. Well, while we're talking about such things, let me mention to folks who may be watching this in the future on YouTube that we are starting the episode known by some as the Oxen of the Sun. It basically takes place in the Hollis Street Maternity Hospital. And upstairs we have some ladies getting ready to give birth. And downstairs we have a ribald and wild group of medical students, peppered with a few non-medical students down in a kind of waiting room, who shall we say, are not respecting the sacredness of birth at all. Of course, they don't respect the sacredness as much as anything. And with that being said, we will begin our reading. And so please take it away, whoever is the first reader.
Deshiel Hollis Amos. Deshiel Hollis Amos. Deshiel Hollis Amos. Send us, bright one, light one, hoar horn, quickening and womb fruit. Send us, bright one, light one, hoar horn, quickening and womb fruit. Send us, bright one, light one, hoar horn, quickening and womb fruit. Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa. Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa. Hoopsa, boy, a boy, hoopsa. Universally, that person's acumen is esteemed, very little perceptive concerning whatsoever matters are being held as most profitably by mortals with sapience endowed to be studied, who is ignorant of that which the most is in doctrine erudite, and certainly by reason of that in them high minds, ornament deserving of veneration, constantly maintain when, by general consent, they affirm that other circumstances being equal, by no exterior splendor is the prosperity of a nation more efficaciously asserted than by the measure of how far forward may have progressed the tribute of its solicitude for that proliferant continuance which of evils the original, if it be absent when fortunately present, constitutes the certain sign of omnipotent nature's incorrupted benefaction. Donna.
I'm sorry, Katrina, but my line went down, so maybe best to skip me for the moment, and I'll try and find where you are.
Okay.
Maybe in the interim, does somebody want to pull us a quick translation of that sentence? Bill, not trying to single anybody out here, but it basically says, okay, Bill, I'll try it, and then you can correct me. I think it basically says, smart people know that it's important to give birth in safe circumstances. Is that it, or have I completely missed it?
No, that's pretty much it, and
Okay.
it's universally accepted that by people of intelligence that must be true.
Right. Okay.
Where am I going to write that?
Sorry, Orla, I'm passing. I don't know where we are.
For who is there who anything of some significance has apprehended but is conscious that the exterior splendor may be the surface of a downward trending lutulant reality, or on the contrary, anyone so is there illuminated as not to perceive that as no nature's boon can contend against the bounty of increase, so it behoves every most just citizen to become the exhortator and admonisher of his semblables, and to tremble lest what had in the past been by the nation excellently commenced might be in the future not with similar excellence accomplished, if an in evercund habit shall have gradually traduced the honourable by ancestors transmitted customs to that hither of profundity, that one was audacious excessively, who would have the hardihood to rise affirming that no more odious offence can for anyone be than to oblivious neglect to consign that evangel simultaneously command and promise which on all mortals with prophecy of abundance or with diminutions menace, that exalted of reiteratedly procreating function ever irrevocably enjoined. And Bill, can you tell us what that means?
Well,
Bill, is it kind of be fruitful and multiply?
again, it's yeah, it's a long way around Nellie's barn to say that
Bounty of increase.
yeah, that it's beneficial for mankind to procreate, and
Right.
yeah, that's basically all that they're saying. Luculent, by the way, I mean, as a word, it's odd because when you first look at it, you think it must have something to do with light or you know, like lucent or something, but it actually means muddy.
Huh.
So it's sort of the downward. Well, I can't even find it now. Where is it?
A downward trending lutulant reality, or on the contrary, about
Yeah.
halfway through, Bill.
Yeah, the downward trending, lutulant or muddy reality. On the contrary, anyone so is there illuminated as not to perceive that as no nature's boon can contend against the bounty of increase, so it behooves every most just citizen to become the exhortator and admonisher of his like semblance, and to tremble lest what had in the past been by the nation excellently commended might be in the future not with similar excellence accomplished. So yeah, it's I don't know, it's an attempt to just to encourage people to um, realize the importance of safe parturition and procreation.
There are a number of different styles involved in this episode.
Yeah.
And this particular one is a Latin prose style of historians Sallust and Tacitus.
Yeah.
Now, aren't you glad you got up today?
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that there are two sentences only. The first is a positive statement. The second is a question. It's interrogative, but it's hard to pick that out until you actually see the punctuation at the end.
Yeah, there's so many subordinate clauses, but
Correct.
that's what Tacitus was known for stylistically.
I've found the place if people want me to continue, or Bill, do you want to pick it up?
Go ahead, Donna.
I'd be very glad to go ahead. This is the third style. It's medieval Latin prose, so that would be very interesting. It is not why, therefore, we shall wonder if, as the best historians relate among the Celts, who nothing that was not in its nature admirable admired, the art of medicine shall have been highly honoured. Not to speak of hostels, leper yards, sweating chambers, plague graves, their greatest doctors, the O'Shiels, the O'Hickeys, the O'Lees, have sedulously set down the divers methods by which the sick and the relapsed found again health, whether the malady had been the trembling, withering, or loose boyconnell flux. Certainly, in every public work, which in it anything of gravity contains, preparation should be with importance commensurate, and therefore a plan was by them adopted, whether by having preconsidered or as the maturation of experience, it is difficult in being said, which the discrepant opinions of subsequent inquirers are not up to the present congrued to render manifest, whereby maternity was so far from all accident possibility removed, that whatever care the patient in that all hardest of women are chiefly required, and not solely for the copiously opulent, but also for her who, not being sufficiently moneyed, scarcely, and often not even scarcely, could subsist valiantly, and for an inconsiderable emolument was provided. To her, nothing already then and thenceforward was anyway able to be molestful. For this chiefly felt all citizens, except with proliferant mothers, prosperity at all, not to can be, and as they had received eternity, God's mortals' generation, to befit them her beholding, when the case was so hoving itself, parturient in vehicle their word, carrying desire immense among all one another, was impelling on of her to be received into that domicile. O thing of prudent nation, not merely in being seen, but also even in being related worthy of being praised, that they her by anticipation went seeing mother, that she by them suddenly to be about to be cherished had been begun, she felt. Phil.
Before born, babe, bliss had, within womb one he worship. Whatever in that one case done commodiously done was. A couch by midwives attended with wholesome food, reposeful, cleanest swaddles, as though forthbringing were now done, and by wise foresight set. But to this no less of what drugs there is need, and surgical implements which are pertaining to her case, not committing aspect of all very distracting spectacles in various latitudes by our terrestrial orb, offered together with images divine and human, the cogitation of which by sejunct females is to tumescence conducive, or eases issue in the high, sun-bright, well-built, fair home of mothers, when ostensibly far gone and reproductive, it has come by her thereto to lie in her term up. Some man that wayfaring was, stood by house door at night's oncoming. Of Israel's folk was that man, that on earth wandering far had fared. Stark ruth of man his errand, that him lone led till that house. Of that house, a horn is lord. 70 beds keeps he there, teeming mothers are wont that they live for to toll and bring forth bairns, male, a hail, so God's angel to Mary quote. Watchers tway their walk, white sisters in ward sleepless, smarts they still sickness soothing, in 12 moons thrice an 100. Truest bed thanes they twain are, for horn holding wariest ward. In ward wary, the watcher wearing, come, that man mid-hearted eft rising with swire swimpled, to him her gate wide undid. Lo, leven leaping lightness in eye blink, Ireland's westward walking. Full she dread that God, the wrecker, all mankind, would ford with water for his evil sins. Christ's rood made she on breastbone, and him drew that he would rather infare under her thatch. That man, her will wotting, worthful, went in Horn's house. Next.
Loath to irk in Horn's hall, hat holding the seeker stood. On her stohy air was living with dear wife and lovesome daughter, that then over land and sea floor 9 years had long outwandered. Once her in town height meeting he, to her bow had not doffed. Her to forgive now, he craved with good ground of her, allowed that of him, swift seen face, hers, so young then had looked. Light swift her eyes kindled, bloom of blushes his word winning. As her eyes then ungot his weeds, swart therefore sorrow she feared. Glad after she was, that e'er a dread was. Her he asked if O'Hare doctor tidings sent from far coast, and she, with grateful sigh, him answered that O'Hare doctor in heaven was. Sad was the man that word to hear, that him so heavy in bowels, ruthful. All she there told him, ruing death for friends so young, old age sore unwilling God's right wiseness to withsay. She said that he had a fair sweet death through God, his goodness with mass priest to be shriven, holy housel and sick men's oils to his limbs. The man then right earnest asked the nun of which death the dead man was died, and the nun answered him and said that he was died in Mona Island through Billy Crab 3 year agone come Childermass, and she prayed to God the all true, all ruthful, to hear his dear soul, to have his dear soul in his undeathliness. He heard her sad words and held hat sad staring. So stood they there both a while in wan hope, sorrowing one with the other. Therefore every man looked to that last end that is thy death, and the dust that gripeth on every man that is born of woman. For as he came naked forth from his mother's womb, so naked shall he wend him to the last, for to go as he came. Next.
The man that was come into the house then spoke to the nursing woman, and he asked her how it fared with the woman that lay there in childbed. The nursing woman answered him and said that that woman was in throes, now full 3 days, and that it would be a hard birth, uneath to bear, and that now in a little it would be. She said thereto that she had seen many births of women, but never was none so hard as was that woman's birth. Then she set it forth all to him, that time was had, lived nigh that house. The man hearkened to her words, for he felt with wonder woman's woe in the travail that they have of motherhood, and he wondered to look on her face, that she was a young face for any man to see, but yet she was left with long years a handmaid, 9-12 blood flows, chiding her childless. And while they spake, the door of the castle was opened, and there nigh them a mickle noise as of many that sat there at meat. And there they came against the place, as they stood a young leaning knight, yclept Dixon, and the traveller Leopold was coot to him sitten. It had happed that they had ado each with other in the house of Misericord, where this learning knight lay by cause the traveller Leopold came there to be healed, for he was sore wounded in his breast by a spear, wherewith a horrible and dreadful dragon was smitten him, for which he did do make a slave of volatile salt and chrism as much as he might suffice. And he said now that he should go into that castle for to make merry with them that was there. And the traveller Leopold said that he should go other whither, for he was a man of cautels and stubble. Also the lady was of his avis, and reproved the learning knight, though she trowed well that the traveller had said thing that was false for his subtlety. But the learning knight would not hear say, nay, nor do her mandement me nay have him in odd contrarious to his list, and he said how it was a marvellous castle. And the traveller Leopold went into the castle for to rest him, for a space being sore of limb, that many marches environing in divers lands, and sometimes venery. And in the castle was set a board that was of the birchwood of Finlandy, and it was upheld by 4 dwarfen men of that country, but they durst not move more for enchantment. And on this board were frightful swords and knives that were made in great craven by swinkling demons out of white flames, that they fix in the horns of buffaloes and stags that there abound marvellously. And there was vassals that were wrought by magic of Mahmud out of a sea sand, and the air by warlock with his breath that he blares into them like the bubbles. And full fair cheer and rich was on the board, that no widget could devise a fuller, nay, richer. And there was a vat of silver that was moved by craft to open, into the which lay strange fishes without und heads, though misbelieving men nigh that this be possible thing, without they see it needless that they are so. And these fishes lie in an oily water brought there from Portugal land, because of the fatness that therein is like to the juices of the olive press. And also it was marvel to see in that castle how by magic they made a compost out of fecund wheat kidneys out of Chaldee, that by aid of certain angry spirits that they do into it swells up wondrously, like to a vast mountain. And they teach the serpents there to entwine themselves up on long sticks out of the ground. And of the scales of those serpents they brew out a brewage like to mead. Next, please.
I'm wondering, sorry, Anne, to cut you off. We've read quite
You're
a bit.
fine.
Could we take some time to talk about it? Because there's a
What
lot.
exactly did we read, or what did I read?
There's only
It seems to me Leopold is going into a pub or something like that.
You were reading medieval English, Jim.
Yes.
yeah, and
Stories
you were
from the-
nearly to the end, Jim.
Stories
There's only a few
from the
lines left.
1400s.
Yeah.
Well, I just finished
So you
that
might as well
paragraph
finish
now,
it.
and then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Okay, because I didn't know where I was. And the learning knight let pour for child Leopold a draught, and helped thereto the while all that they were there drank each every, and child Leopold did up his beaver for to pleasure him, and took apertly somewhat in amity, for he never drank no manner of mead, which he then put by, and anon full privily he vowed that the more part in his neighbour glass, and his neighbour nist not of his wild. And he sat down in that castle with them for to rest him there a while. Thanked be Almighty God.
Makes much more sense now, Jim.
It does, I
Does, yeah.
think.
All I recognized was anchovies.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
there
think
were
That's
there's
all I
definitely
recognized.
there's definitely alcohol involved.
and anchovies. So so there's a bunch of young knights, these young doctors and their friends sitting around, and Leopold's been invited to join them, and they fill up his cup, but since he doesn't drink very much, he pours most of his into his neighbor's glass, who doesn't notice he's doing it. but that way he can maintain his sobriety while everybody else is getting drunk.
Cute boyo.
Okay, if we go way back to where we started after discussing the first paragraph, so I'm on the second paragraph. Does anybody know what boyconnell means? Loose, trembling,
Yeah.
withering, or loose boyconnell?
The Boyconnell flux was a plague that struck Ireland
Okay.
a couple of times. It was called the Yellow Plague. It might have been yellow fever, but it's an illness causing diarrhea and a variety of other things.
Okay, good.
Fever,
So it's an
fever.
Bill, can you say the name of that again, please? What did you call it? The name of the illness?
Boyconnell. Oh, well, it's a yellow plague, but the Boyconnell flux was another term for it. A plague that struck a couple of different times in Ireland, called
Okay.
the Yellow Plague, that caused vomiting and diarrhea and probably jaundice, among other things.
Mhm.
Hence the name.
Oh,
okay.
And when they talk about Mona Island, they're not talking about Puerto Rico, where there is a Mona Island. They're talking about Anglesey in Wales. So the doctor that Bloom is remembering fondly, that he liked, had left and gone to Anglesey to practice for a while, and that's where he died of stomach crabs or some kind of cramping or whatever. That would have been might have been appendicitis. It's hard to know.
Okay, and so I'm just kind of because we bit off a huge chunk here, and so I'm just trying to kind of go paragraph by paragraph. Okay, so when we switch to the alliterative Old English, before born babe bliss had, within wooed one he worship. It's suggesting there. I'm just doing a quick scan of it. It's suggesting there that when women are needing to deliver, that assistance is provided. Is that correct in that one?
What line are you
Yeah,
on?
not just assistance, but comfort.
Comfort.
Yeah, they're laid up in comfortable beds with pictures of
Okay.
the saints and holy pictures around them
All right.
to give
Okay.
them both instruction and some kind of solace.
Okay.
Both
Sounds
food.
And then Bloom shows up.
right. And it's couched. Lois, have you got the location you were looking for? Did you find it?
Before babe born, is that line
Yeah.
60?
Okay. So now
Yeah,
in the
I
next
got it.
paragraph, Bill has said Bloom shows up, but it's
Right.
couched in terms of the wandering Jew, correct?
Yeah. But
And there
yeah,
is an Old English poem also called The Wayfarer.
right.
It's Anglo-Saxon alliterative prose of Aelfric.
Mhm. So then it describes the maternity hospital run by Dr. Horn. They had 20 beds, and more than 300 women a year were delivered of children.
Okay, my edition's got 70 beds, Bill, but I again, it might be a Gabler change.
Oh, no, you're right. It's 70 beds. My vision's not great. I read 20 as 70. 70 as 20. It's 70.
There's still a
70.
shortage of beds in Ireland, of course.
Yeah.
Canada too.
And then there were Tway watchers there who walk, white sisters who don't sleep.
So
and
these
they-
are the
and-
nurses then, Bill?
Yeah, the nurses.
Okay.
Well, they call nurses sisters. They weren't
Yes.
necessarily nuns, but they
Right.
were they were nurses.
And they get 300 a year. Is that correct? 12
Yeah,
moons, thrice and
right.
100?
In 12 moons, thrice and 100.
And then in the next paragraph, okay, so if they're wimpled, does that mean that they're wearing the wimple? Does that mean that they're
Yeah.
nuns?
Yeah.
Okay,
It could be, but even sisters, even nurses wore a hat
Okay.
of sorts. It
All right.
might have been a wimple, but they may also be a nursing order of nuns. I'm not really sure in this case whether it matters, but they're either nuns or they're sister nuns.
Right. And is her top unbuttoned at the back? Is that what is being said here? So she wimpled to him, her gate wide undid.
No, her gate wide undid. She opened the door for Bloom, basically.
Ah, okay.
He
Okay.
knocks at the door, she comes and she opens the door for him and lets him
Okay.
in.
And then okay, so full she drad that God the wreaker of all mankind or wrecker of all mankind would fordo with water for his evil sins. So I'm assuming we're not wanting another flood here. Is that the deal? But like that just seems to come out of nowhere.
Sorry, Dave, where are you?
Okay, sorry. Absolutely. Very good question. So the paragraph starts in ward wary the watcher hearing. Okay, so again we've got the Old English or the Anglo-Saxon alliteration. And I'm looking at the I think it's the third sentence. Full she drad that God the wreaker or wrecker of all mankind, I think wrecker of all mankind, would fordo with water for his evil sins.
Yeah, well, right before that, there's a lightning flash. Bloom's outside.
That's
It's raining and storming.
Okay.
Because when they go back outside later, it's been raining. You know, it's I don't know when we actually see that more clearly, but that couple of lines right before that, where is it? Up. Leven leaping lightens in eye blink, Ireland's westward welkin.
That's what it is. Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Bill. Thank you. I
So-
understand what's going on now. Yeah.
So Bloom's at the door and it's raining out and the wind and it's lightning and storming. And the nun says, well, I hope God's not sending another flood, basically.
Got it. Okay. Christ's rood she made on her breastbone, so she crossed herself,
Right.
and him drew that he would rather infare under her thoughts. So that she wanted him to come in quickly.
Yeah.
That man, her will wadding, worthful went in Horn's house, and he didn't argue with her. He came in.
Right.
Okay.
So he stood in the hall holding his hat. And then he remembers that he was living with Millie and Molly. 9 years he had wandered since Millie was born, and Millie was born at that hospital, and that's the doctor that delivered Millie is the one he's asking about.
Okay.
And he had met this nun previously.
And so what's the forgiveness business?
Well, he'd run into her on the street afterwards, and he hadn't recognized her.
Got it. Okay. All
And
right.
he's asking her if she'll forgive him for not
okay.
acknowledging her.
Was it Rudy or Millie that was there? Because it's
good
9
question.
years.
Good question. It's probably Rudy. 9 years, yeah.
Although I thought Rudy was born 11.
He's
Rudy was
11.
11. Yeah, Rudy's
Yeah, I thought he was
11
born
years.
at home with
Yeah.
with a local neighbor.
Right, and Millie would have been. Well, Millie is now what, 16?
15, I think, isn't she?
15.
15, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was that it might mean that they were neighbors one time, weren't they?
Yeah.
So is he thinking back to when he was a neighbor of a woman? No? Could that be it?
Okay.
Then he asked her about Dr. O'Hare.
He's dead 3 years.
Yeah.
Right, but before dying, he received confession, the
Right.
Eucharist, and what we used to call extreme unction, but I think it's called sacrament of the sick now.
Right. Right.
The sick men's oil, yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be the oil of extreme unction.
Right,
Right.
right.
Through belly crab, whatever that is.
I'd say it's not a nice thing somehow.
No, it doesn't sound good.
I think you're right, Dunn. I think none of us would like to be afflicted with it.
Therefore, every man look to that last end that is thy death, and the dust that gripeth on every man that is born of woman. For as he came naked forth from this mother's womb, so naked shall he wend him at the last, for to go as he came. So that's just, I think that's just the author's just interjection. And it's appropriate, I think, because we're talking about birth and, death is the end of that, I guess.
And maybe an allusion to the medieval poem Everyman.
Sure.
Okay.
It's Middle English.
Yeah, Middle
Right.
English. Then he asked the woman how it's going with Mrs. Purefoy, and the nursing woman answered him that she was in full throw now, full 3 days, and it would be a hard birth, hard to bear, but that now in a little it would be. She then talks about she'd seen many births of women, that never was none so hard as was that woman's birth. So Mrs. Purefoy is really having a hard go of it.
Has the style changed here? It seems a little bit more comprehensible.
It
Yeah, it's
changes as, and whiles they spake the door is where it changes.
Yeah,
About
in the next paragraph it
524 or
changes.
so.
Right, yeah. The very next paragraph, and whilst they
Whilst they
spoke,
spake.
the door of the castle opened. But in the meantime, we're still in this Middle English.
But I think, Lois, to your question, I think we've moved away from the alliterative Anglo-Saxon or Old English into Middle English, which is actually more comprehensible. Like you can pick up Chaucer. I used to do it with my grade 8 kids. I'm going, okay, can you pick some words out here? Whereas I used to show them some Beowulf, and it was just impossible. So it has become more comprehensible, certainly.
Sorry, Dave, the last section was Middle English, but
correct.
Where we're starting now, it's medieval travel stories from the 1400s.
Which starting at the and whiles they spake.
While they spake the door. Yeah.
I'm in the previous paragraph for a bit longer, Donna, and there's just something. I mean, I guess you read it and it all strikes you differently. But the man hearkened to her words, for he felt with wonder woman's woe in the travail they have of motherhood, and he wondered to look on her face that was a fair face for any man to see, and but yet she was left after long years a handmaid. So there are two things at work there. He's in awe at women being able to give birth, And I think everybody's experience is different. I saw my wife give birth to our 4 children, and I have to tell you that if I had to give birth to one, it would have finished me. So I think from a male standpoint, this really resonates with me because I'm just in awe at how this happened. And then it's
It
interesting.
didn't curtail your style, though, Dave, did it? That was the first one.
Right? No, there were 3 future ones, but that's right, exactly. That's good, Donna. But then also the irony that this woman is working in a maternity hospital, but she's still a handmaid.
Yeah, he's remarking on how pretty she is,
Yeah.
and that she hasn't gotten married in the 9 years since he saw her last. That she's still unmarried and childless.
Yes, and it's interesting. It's 9/12 blood flows, which I think he's referring to menstruation here, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Donna, could you just review it for me because I'm a bit attention deficit here. So we change. I've got a mark here as well in my book. So style changes, and whilst they spake, the door of the castle was opened, and there nighed them a mickle noise of many that sat there at meat. So we're changing style to what?
To medieval travel stories from the 1400s.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
What I have. And that goes down all the way down the next page down to this meanwhile, this good sister.
Okay.
where we
Okay.
get-
Thus the insistence that Jim finish the job.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it goes right down to thanks be Almighty God.
Okay. So Dixon, who's a young learning knight, so yclept. So the guy who's named Dixon meets him at the door. Is that right? Of this little room.
Yeah, we haven't read that section yet, but that is right.
No, I think
No, we
Jim
have read it. Jim read it.
Oh, did he read the whole
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I finished the job.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
For the purposes of clarity.
And he had, and so his association with Bloom is that Bloom had received the dragon
B string.
right? He received the B string, and it was Dixon who looked after him, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I just love how this is put. He was wounded in his breast by a spear wherewith a horrible and dreadful dragon was smitten him. And so Bloom is reluctant to go into the room, correct? And the traveler Leopold said he would go other whither, for he was a man of caudals and subtle. So Dixon wants him to come in, and Bloom is not really wanting to go. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And what is a subtile?
I got it. It's cunning, crafty, sagacious, or discerning.
Mm-hmm.
I won't even ask what caudals are.
Caution.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder, is there a parallel between Child Leopold and Child Harold poem? And of course, I can't. Who wrote Child Harold? Was it Spencer?
Yeah, Byron, wasn't it?
Byron.
Let me check. I'll do a quick check.
It was Byron.
It is Byron? Okay.
Yeah. But child was a very common term for just like a Mr. Harold or young man Harold or whatever.
But does it suggest a young person then? A youngish version of Leopold?
But not in our sense of a child.
Okay.
It would have been maybe an unmarried man would have been known as a child. Though I don't quote me on that, but I think that might be one of the distinctions.
Okay.
But it doesn't correspond to our concept of children or a child. It's just a term for a young man, like I don't know what else, how we would call them. Master, maybe Master Harold.
Okay.
So Dixon finally prevails upon him, and the traveller Leopold went into the castle for to rest him for a space, being sore of limb after many marches environing in divers lands and sometimes venery.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just a wonderful line.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what's venery?
Sexual indulgence.
Sexual indulgence. So yeah, his masturbation.
Exactly right.
You did ask him.
So
No,
And so an
Benjamin.
answer was deserved.
he has come, and now here he comes.
Missing.
Ah,
Sore of limb.
Well, who were the four dwarfsmen from Finland?
So are they carved table legs?
Maybe.
The four dwarfmen?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because they're enchanted. They can't move.
Right.
Mhm. It's a pretty fanciful description of a very simple situation.
Right.
Are these candlesticks white flames and horns of buffalo?
Okay. So I'm wondering, I'm wondering, Lois, again, the hyperbole here is delightful, but is it that these are knives and forks?
Yeah.
And so the handles are made of horn.
Right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Which would have been fairly common.
Okay.
Bone or horn.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you could afford it, ivory, but more likely just bone or horn, which would have been more common and less expensive. Vessels wrought by magic of Mahound out of sea sand. So that's glass. So they had glasses.
Okay, so and then they've got the sardines or whatever laid out without heads. Now, does the word "nie" N-I-E, is that deny? Misbelieving men deny that this be possible thing without they see it, nonetheless they are so.
Yeah, it's like deny or say no to. Yeah, deny.
Okay.
So they think it's impossible unless they see it themselves. And then it's a discussion of the brewing process.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
They make a compound out of fecund wheat kidneys out of Chaldee that by the aid of certain angry spirits that they do into it swells up wondrously. So that's bread. So the yeast are the angry spirits that make bread rise so that they have these loaves of bread and then they teach the serpents there to entwine themselves up on long sticks out of the ground, and of the scales of these serpents they brew out a brewage like to mead. So the catesis, the symbol of medicine, is the stick with the serpents entwining it. But how that relates to mead, I'm not quite certain. And the learning knight, so that would be Dixon, who is a student, a medical student. He might have probably was an intern or somebody who attended Bloom when Bloom came to the emergency room for the bee sting. He's not maybe not an official doctor yet, but he's a medical student. The learning knight let pour for Leopold a draft, and he helped himself to it. That they were there and they all were drinking, and Leopold did up his beaver, so took off his hat, and took a little sip, for he never drank no manner of mead, and then he put it by, and later, quietly or privately, he voided the more part, so he poured out most of it in his neighbor glass, and his neighbor missed not of his while, so his neighbor didn't notice. And he sat down in that castle with them for to rest him there a while. Thanked be Almighty God.
And Billy, just to take you back to the previous paragraph, the angry spirits are yeast.
I think it's yeast. Yeah,
Okay.
he's talking about making the fact that there was bread on the table.
Right. And Chaldea, I just did a Google search. I'm assuming Chaldea would be Chaldea.
Chaldea.
Chaldea,
in the
which is an
Mediterranean.
ancient country on the left bank of the Euphrates, which
Right.
is where I think wheat got its origin, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
There's a reference in the Bible to Ur of the Chaldeans.
Right.
Right, okay. So, Donna, just to give us a sneak preview of the next paragraph, because I've got a change marked here. What
Yeah.
style are we getting for this? Meanwhile, the good sister stood by the door.
We're going into Arthurian legend from the 1400s.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
That's going to stay with us for about 4 pages.
Yeah. The high history of the Holy Grail and Mort Arthur and the like. So who's reading now?
Me.
Okay, so just so I know, if Jim had to read the entire section, his entire section, does this mean Anne would have to read like 4 or 5 pages worth?
No,
Jim can
Dave.
stop whenever she needs.
That won't be happening.
Thank it be
I'll be
Almighty
handing
God.
over to you.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll be handing it over to you.
Okay.
Unless you really get into it.
Exactly. We'll see how it turns out. Okay. Meanwhile, this good sister stood by the door and begged them at the reference of Jesu or Alter Lord to leave their wassailing, for there was above one quick-wit child, a gentle dame, whose time paid fast. So Leopold heard on the uproar cry on high, and he wondered what cry that was, whether of child or woman. And I marvel, said he, that it be not come or now. Meseems it journed overlong, and he was ware and saw a franklin that height, Lenehan on that side the table, that was older than any of the two there, and for that they both were knights virtuous in the one emprise, and eke, by cause that he was elder, he spoke to him full gently. But, said he, or it be long too, she will bring forth by God his bounty, and have joy of her childing, for she had waited marvellously long. And Franklin that had drunken said, expecting each moment to be her next. Also he took the cup that stood before him, for him needed never none asking, nor desiring of him to drink, and now drink, said he, fully delectably, and he quaffed as far as he might to their both health, for he was a passing good man of his lustness. And Sir Leopold, That was the godliest guest that ever sat in Scholars' Hall, and that was the meekest man and the kindest that ever laid husbandly hand under hand. And that was the very truest knight of the world, one that ever did minion service to lady gentle, pledged him courtly in the cup, woman's woe with wonder pondering. Now let us speak of that fellowship that was there to the intent to be drunken, and they might. There was a sort of scholars along either side the board, that is to wit, Dixon Eclipsed, junior of St. Mary Mercywills, with other his fellow, Lynch and Madden, scholars of medicine, and Franklin that high at Lenehan, and one from Alba Longa, one Crotters, and young Stephen that had man of a freer, that was at head of the board, and Costello, that man Clepin Punch Costello, all long of a mastery of him, erewhile gestured. And of all them, reserved young Stephen, he was the most drunken, that demanded still of more mead. And beside the meek Sir Leopold. But on young Malachy they waited for that he promised to have come, and such as intended, to no goodness said he how he had broken his vow. And Sir Leopold sat with them, for he bore fast friendship to Sir Simon. And to this his son young Stephen, and for that his languor becalmed him. There, after longless wanderings, in so much as they feasted him for that time in the honourablest manner, Ruth read him, love led on with will to wander, loath to leave. How are you now, Dave? You
Oh,
ready to take
Yeah,
up the
I
matter?
am. As long as it's not disappointing you to have to stop in.
No, not in the
Okay,
slightest.
fair enough. For they were right witty scholars, and he heard the arsons each gen the other as touching birth and righteousness. Young Madden maintaining that put such case it were hard the wife to die, for so it had fallen out a matter of some year agone with a woman of Ablana in Horn's house that now was trespassed out of this world, and the self night next before her death all leeches and apothecaries had taken counsel of her case. And they said further that she should live, because in the beginning, they said, the woman should bring forth in pain. And wherefore they were of this imagination affirmed, they that were of this imagination affirmed how young Madden had said truth, for he had conscience to let her die. And not few of these were young Lynch, were in doubt that the world was now right evil governed, as it was never other, howbeit the mean people believed it otherwise, but that the law nor his judges did provide no remedy. A redress God grant. This was scant said, but all cried with one acclaim, Nay, by our Virgin Mary, the wife should live, and the babe to die. In colour whereof they waxed hot upon that head, but with argument and what further drinking. But the Franklin Lenehan was prompt each when to pour them ale, so that at the least way mirth might not lack. Then young Madden showed all the whole affair, and said how that she was dead, and of how for holy religion's sake, by rede of palmer and beadsman, and for a vow he had made to Saint Ultan of Abracam, her goodman husband would not let her death, whereby they were all wondrous grieved. To whom young Stephen had these words following, Murmur, sirs, is eke oft among the lay folk. Both babe and parent now glorify their Maker, the one in limbo gloom, the other in purge fire. But gramercy, what of those God-possible souls that we nightly impossibilize, which is the sin against the Holy Ghost, very God, Lord and giver of life. For, sirs, he said, our lust is brief. We are means to these small creatures within us, and nature has other ends than we. Then said Dixon Jr. to Punch Costello, wist he what ends. But he that had over much drunken, and the best word he could have of him was he would ever dishonest a woman, whoso she were, or wife, or maid, or leman, if it so fortune him to be delivered of his spleen of lusty head. Whereat Crothers of Elba Longa sang young Malachi's praise of that beast, the unicorn, How once in the millennium he cometh by his horn, the other all this while pricked forward with their jibes, wherefore they did malice him, witnessing all and several by Saint Fortinus his engines, that he was able to do any manner of thing that lay in man to do. Thereat laughed they all right jocundly, only young Stephen and Sir Leopold, which never durst laugh too open by reason of a strange humour, which he would not bewray, and also for that he rued for her that bare whoso she might be, or wheresoever. Okay, so I'll finish this paragraph then. Then spake young Stephen, Orgulus, of Mother Church, that would cast him out of her bosom, of law of canons, of Lilith, patron of abortions, of bigness wrought by wind of seeds of brightness, or by potency of vampires, mouth to mouth, or, as Virgilius saith, by influence of the Occident, or by reek of moonflower, or, and she lie with a woman which her man has but lain with, effecto secuto, or peradventure in her bath, according to the opinions of Averroes and Maimonides. He also said how at the end of the second month the human soul was infused, and how in all our earthly mother foldeth ever souls for God's greater glory, whereas that earthly mother, which was but a dam to bear beastly, should die by canon. For so saith he that holdeth the fisherman's seal, even that blessed Peter, on which rock was holy church for all ages founded. All they bachelors then asked if Sir Leopold would be in like case so jeopard her person as risk life to save life. A wariness of mind, he would answer as fitted all in all, and, laying hand to jaw, he said, dissembling as his wont was, that as it was informed him, who had ever loved the art of physic as might a layman, and agreeing also with his experience of so seldom seen an accident, it was good for that the Mother Church belike at one blow had birth and death pence, and in such sort delivery escaped their question. That is truth, party, said Dixon, and, or I err, a pregnant word, which hearing young Stephen was a marvellous glad man, and he averred that he who stealeth from the poor lendeth to the Lord, for he was of a wild manner when he was drunken, and that he was now in that taking it appeared eftsoons. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it now. Do we want to discuss or pass it on to Sylvia?
Sylvia said she's not reading.
Okay. I wonder. Okay, so I would just say then, to answer my own question, I wonder if it'd be worthwhile trying to parse this out just a little bit. It's quite a bit here.
Sorry, Dave, before you start that, there's one paragraph left in that section if you want to.
There is. Okay, no, that's good. Thank you. Okay, I will not take that paragraph though.
Okay.
Rena.
But Sir Leopold was passing grave, Moog, his word by cause. He still had pity of the terror-causing shrieking of shrill women in their labor. And as he was reminded of his good Lady Marian that had borne him an only man-child, which on his 11th day on live had died, and no man of art could save so dark his destiny. And she was wondrous stricken of heart for the evil hap, and for his burial did him on a fair corselet of lamb's wool, the flower of the flock, lest he might perish utterly and lie a keel. For it was then about the midst of the winter, and now Sir Leopold, that had of his body no man-child for an heir, looked upon him his friend's son, and was shut up in sorrow for his forepast happiness, and as sad as he was that him failed a son of such gentle courage, for all accounted him of real parts, so grieved he also in no less measure for young Stephen, for that he lived riotously with those wastrels, and murdered his goods with horrors.
Wow.
So it's interesting, Lenihan is always the wag. He's always making bad jokes and trying to keep the party going and keep everybody happy. So he does that right at the beginning when so the Reverend Sister begs them in Jesus' name to be quiet, that there was one who quick with child, and Leopold heard the cry on high and wondered what cry it was, whether of child or woman. And said he that he marvels, said he, that it was not come or now. Meseems it dureth over long. So it seems, Bloom is thinking and saying that it seems like she's been having in labor a long time. And he was where, so he noticed that a Franklin called Lenehan on that side of the table that was older than any of the other. So he's not one of the students, but he's a hangers-on. Lenehan is always a guy in the bar who's hoping to get somebody to buy him a drink. And this is a free drinks all around here at this table. So he's helping everybody and helping himself at the same time. That was elder than any of the other, and for that they both were knights virtuous. So he and Bloom in the same emprise, and by cause that he was elder, he spoke to him full gently. So Bloom said, was said basically to Lenehan that it's a long time. But said he, or it belong to, she will bring forth by God his bounty and have joy of her childing, for she hath waited marvelous long. So Bloom says this to Lenehan, and Lenehan responds with a joke. And the Franklin that had drunken said, expecting each moment to be her next. Obviously, instead of the phrase would be expecting each moment to be her last. She thinks she's dying, but she's screaming because she's thinking each moment will be her next, meaning the pain is not going to go away anytime. So Lenehan is, he's always making these ridiculously bad jokes.
Starting with Rose of Castile, correct?
Yes, Rose of Castile, among other things. Thank you, boo, muchy boo, and all this other nonsense, when he asks for a cigarette and he makes up, he's always doing that.
Yeah, I was thinking that he's the fellow that's lighting the cigarettes in the
in the editor's office, but that enables him to get a free cigarette as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's the guy pouring the drinks here, but that enables him to get a few.
Right, and his literary reach is long because we first encounter him in Dubliners.
Yeah.
Two Gallants, right?
Yeah, Two Gallants.
Right.
Or Two Gallants.
Where once again he's with a fellow who's trying to weasel money out of a housemaid, correct?
Yeah. And so then it basically says no one ever had to ask him twice to have a drink. And so Lenehan picks up the drink and he quaffed as far as he might to their both health, for he was a passing good man of his lustiness. And Leopold, who was the goodliest guest that ever sat in Scholars' Hall, and was the meekest man and the kindest that ever had husbandly hand under hen, and that was the very truest knight of the world, one that ever did minion service to lady gentle, pledged him courtly in the cup. So Bloom responds, picks up his glass, and says to Lenehan too, basically, to your health. Woman's woe with wonder pondering. So Bloom is, he's pretending to be happy-go-lucky like the rest of them and having a good time, but he's wondering about what Mrs. Purefoy is really going through. And then there's a description of all of the party. Dixon, Lynch, and Madden, all of whom are students. Lenihan, and then Carruthers, who is a Scotsman from Alba Longa, and Stephen, who is at the head of the board, and then Punch Costello on his left, or maybe on his right, I suppose. I don't know. It's hard to tell which way they're talking, but Stephen was the most drunken and was always asking for more. And then Leopold. And they were waiting for Mulligan because he promised to be there, but he hasn't come yet. And then Bloom is thinking, because he's a friend of Simon's, and he knows Stephen for a long time. He knew Stephen when he was a boy in the garden, when he has many memories of him. So he was loath to leave. He didn't want to just leave because he was worried about Stephen drinking so much. And they were right witty scholars, and he heard their arguments to each other about birth and righteousness. Madden maintaining about a hard case where there was consideration of whether the wife would die and they would save the child, or whether they should save the wife and let the child die, and they were arguing all about that.
Just stop you there for a sec, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm kind of working through here too. If I'm not mistaken, though, Catholic doctrine would say let nature take its course, correct? And you would not necessarily intervene to sacrifice the child to save the mother's life.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Okay.
Whereas I think in the Jewish tradition, you would save the mother.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, in the Jewish tradition, life begins at the first breath.
Okay.
So the mother is alive, the child is not,
Right. Okay.
and so you would sacrifice the child to save the mother. The mother could always have another child, the assumption being, but to let the mother die would be wrong in according to the Jewish biblical tradition. I don't know how much that is true now or not, and that's my understanding of it. I might be completely wrong, but I think that's where it stands. But you're right, in terms of Catholic tradition, you can't intervene. You have to just let nature take its course. And if the woman dies, and if they both die, that's God's will.
Yeah, right. And that's I think that's what's talked about. To whom young Stephen had these words following, murmur, sirs, is eke oft among lay folk. Both babe and parent now glorify their maker, the one in limbo. Gloom, that'd be the baby, the mother
Right.
in purge fire, the other in purge fire.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so is it, okay, gramercy, but what of these God possible souls that we nightly impossibilize, which is the sin against the Holy Ghost?
That's masturbation or onanism.
Right. I was thinking the
So yeah,
onanism.
so
Yeah,
Stephen's saying, well, if that's the case, but what about all of the sperm that we just waste? Then, and that's a sin against the Holy Ghost. I think we get
Right.
that first in maybe Portrait of the Artist.
right. Or even perhaps I'm wondering Bill wearing a condom here.
Yeah, it could be too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Though I don't think condoms were that common in Ireland. They were known as French letters, and
Right.
I think they were gettable, but I don't think everyone had them.
Okay.
And Yeah, I'm not sure.
So the small creatures within us would be the sperm, correct?
Right.
Okay.
In Monty Python's The Meaning of Life movie, they sang every sperm is sacred. That was a keeping of Catholic tradition.
Right. But then Stephen, who's drunk, says he doesn't care what woman he'd want. He's willing, ready, willing, and able. He would ever dishonest a woman, whoso she were, or wife, or maid, or leman, if it so fortuned him to be delivered of his spleen of lusty head. So he's basically saying he really is horny, and he wants to satisfy that. Whereas Crothers sang young Malachi's praise of that beast, the unicorn, that once in the millennium he cometh by his horn, the other all is while pricked forward with their jibes, wherewith. So I don't know. I'm assuming that Malachi has another poem about a unicorn um, who gets lucky once every 1,000 years.
Does a unicorn have any sex organs?
Well, I think it's just metaphorically, or some kind of double entendre, that a unicorn has a single horn, and that a man's penis would be compared to that, I guess. But I don't think we ever get that song or poem from Malachi. Maybe we do. I can't remember exactly. He has so many of them. And then they all laughed, except for Stephen and Leopold. And then Stephen was talking about the church that would cast him out of her bosom, of the law of canons, of Lilith, patron of abortions, of bigness brought by wind, of seeds of brightness, or by potency of vampires mouth to mouth. That's his poem of the vampire. Or as Virgil says, by the influence of the Occident, or by the reek of moonflower, or an she lie with a woman which her man has but laid with. So he's talking about the different ways women can get pregnant. That maybe it's, if a woman lies with a woman who's been inseminated, or if in a bath, um, in her bath, according to the opinions of Averroes and of Moses Maimonides. And also how at the end of the second month, a human soul was infused, and how in all the Holy Mother foldeth ever souls to God's greater glory, whereas that earthly mother, which was but a dam to bring forth beastly, would die by canon. So they'll let women die, for so saith he that holdeth the fisherman's seal, that would be St. Peter, or the Pope in this case, even that blessed Peter, on which rock was Holy Church for all ages founded. So that's canon law, is basically that, women, however they get pregnant in the second month, I guess the soul is infused into the body. Maybe that was the belief then in terms of Catholicism. I think now many evangelicals and many Christians believe it's instantaneous. And in fact, there's a big movement here in the United States by the anti-abortion people about in vitro fertilization, that all of the embryos that are in test tubes or frozen in various people, according to the evangelicals, those are all human souls, and they deserve the dignity of a burial and to be treated, not to be experimented on, and not just to be thrown away after a couple has had one implanted. That you can't just, according to them, these are all human souls right from the beginning, even if they're in vitro fertilized. But I'm not sure what
an instructive way to look at how language works upon our psyche. That if you're a person who believes that, and probably believes it fervently.
Yeah.
I would like to say that although I've been as lazy as an old dog during all of this, that I've really enjoyed the conversation today. In fact, I might even go so far as to say most enjoyable readings of Oxen and the Sun in my experience. So that's great.
I know we're at our cutoff time, and that you are usually most careful about the hour, but I'm wondering if it, in this case, would be worth avoiding prorogation for just a bit until we work our way through this section. There's not much left to go before we're into a change. Would that be possible, or are people irrevocably decided that we have to leave?
What kind of clemency are you asking for?
Maybe the benevolence of 5 to 10 minutes, tops till 1:40, because Bloom dodges. Bloom is put on the spot about this, and he ducks it, and it's maybe worth talking about.
Yeah, I think it's only another paragraph.
Yeah, it is. It's there's not much left.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Clemency is granted.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Sorry,
we also
get. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just saying, we also get a very poignant and sad moment of Bloom remembering Rudy's birth and death. I mean, it's really, that's the whole point of this. They're talking about a child or a mother dying in childbirth, and then Bloom has actual experience of that, which none of these kids, none of these doctors or these other people have, but he has experienced it. So then all they bachelors asked Sir Leopold, would he, in like case, so jeopard her person to risk life to save life? So they actually asked Leopold, you're married. Would you let your wife die to save your child? Is basically what they're saying, what they're asking him. And then a wariness of mind, he would answer as fit at all. And laying hand to jaw, he said, dissembling, as his wont was. So he's not going to actually bare his soul to these kids, to these people, that as it was informed him, who had ever loved the art of physic, as might a layman, and agreeing also with his experience of so seldom seen an accident, it was good for that mother church, belike at one blow had birth and death pence, and in such short deliveredly he escaped their questions. And then Dixon says, that's truth. and a pregnant word, which hearing young Stephen was a marvelous glad man, and he averred that he who stealeth from the poor lendeth to the Lord, for he was of a wild manner when he was drunken, and that he was now in that taking it appeared eftsoon. So he was really getting drunk.
Okay, so so am I correct in saying that Stephen's comment is a complete non sequitur to what's happened before it?
No, I wouldn't say it's a non sequitur. Um,
Because they're talking about prioritizing the mother's life for the child, and Stephen says, "He who stealeth from the poor lendeth to the Lord."
Yeah, I think Stephen is saying the church is going to get its money one way or another. It's going to get its birth pence or its death pence.
Okay.
And so he's pretty blasphemous. He's not very he doesn't think much of Catholicism or of the
Got it.
church
Okay, right.
and
I
of
see.
of their practices. He's saying,
Okay.
they've got their rules, but they're going to get paid one way or another. They don't really care what
Okay.
happens to mother or child.
Okay.
But
I
then we
thought.
have this.
Okay. I thought birth and death pence was being used figuratively, but in fact there was a pence that was paid.
Well, I mean, you do. I mean, you pay the priest for the mass, the mass of the dead. You certainly
Right.
pay
Okay.
the
Fair enough. Sure.
funeral. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
the church gets something. But
The
Sir
church always
Leopold
gets
was
something.
passing grave his word by cause he still had pity of the terror-causing shrieking of shrill women in their labor. And as he was minded of his good lady, Marion, that's Marion Tweedy or Molly, that had borne him an only man-child, which on his 11th day on live had died, and no man of art could save so dark his destiny. And she was wondrous stricken of heart in that evil hap, and for his burial did him in a fair corselet of lamb's wool. We hear Molly talk about that in her soliloquy at the very end of the story. So she was really stricken by his death, and then buried in a she had made a vest or something out of lamb's wool because it was winter time, and even though he's a dead baby, she wants him to be protected. The flower of the flock, lest he might perish utterly and lie acled, for it was then about the midst of the winter. And now Sir Leopold, that had of his body no man-child for an heir, looked upon him, his friend's son, that would be Stephen, Simon's son, and was shut up in sorrow for his forepast happiness. And as sad as he was that him failed a son of such gentle courage, for all counted him of real parts, so grieved he also in no less measure for young Stephen, for that he lived riotously with these wastrels and murdered his goods with whores. So, and I think it's apparent that Bloom is not drinking and has his wits about him. He's not, whereas all these other students and everybody else are getting drunker and just saying things without thinking much about them, whether it might be hurtful or embarrassing to someone to say.
Bill,
Yeah.
done a lot of hard work on our account this session, and I want to
Well,
thank you.
no,
This has been
Well, thank
really,
you.
really instructive.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Bill.
I
Well-
sure
Yes,
appreciate it.
excellent.
Absolutely.
Yes, very happy to hear all this information.
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Bill.
you're welcome. I'm
Yes.
happy to share. Don't
Thank you.
quote me on any of it, but
Please.
No, but thank you. It's very generous.
it's the language gets in the way sometimes, and a lot of people really struggle with this episode because of that. And they'll just read along sort of drowsily. I mean, you just keep reading words, but they don't register as meaning anything. You're just saying, but when you really look at it and figure it out. There's a lot here.
Yeah, it's been good. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks. This has been
Thank
great.
you.
It's been a very good session.
Yes.
And we will gather here together next Thursday. And for those of you who are doing the Shakespeare, we are gathering together tomorrow to continue working on The Merchant of Venice.
Mm-hmm.
The two
yeah.
gobbles.
Yeah, so I'm going to press the end button and
Thanks.
bid you all
Thank you.